FM News Talk 97.1. On-demand audio.
We saw in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, our government engaged in enhanced interrogation techniques that contradicted our values. As a senator, I was critical of several practices, such as warrantless wiretaps. And all too often, new authorities were instituted without adequate public debate. Through a combination of action by the courts, increased congressional oversight, and adjustments by the previous administration, some of the worst excesses that emerged after 9/11 were curbed by the time I took office. But a variety of factors have continued to complicate America's efforts to both defend our nation and uphold our civil liberties.
Namely this administration. Joining us to discuss the president's speech today on the NSA to get his reaction, Senator Rand Paul. Senator Paul, good afternoon to you. Thanks so much for joining me.
Good to be with you, Dana.
You had made the remark earlier, quote, I think what you heard was if you like your privacy, you can keep it. It doesn't sound like much in the president's speech in terms of reforms. Much is going to change with the NSA. Your reaction?
You know, basically he said that they're going to continue collecting all the data they've been collecting and realize what data is being collected. Your phone records, your emails, your text messages, and we think likely your credit card information too. And think about what you can find out if you know someone's, if we were able to look at your credit card bill, we can tell whether you smoke, whether you drink, whether you gamble, what books you read, what doctors you see. Do you see a psychiatrist? Do you take medications? What medications you take? All that can be seen on the metadata of your Visa bill. I think most Americans think that you do have a right to privacy. And if someone thinks you're a terrorist, by all means, I don't care. We can look at the Visa bill of a terrorist, but you got to ask a judge. You got to name the person and then get the information. You shouldn't just say you can write one warrant and get that kind of information for every American.
Right. And in his remarks, too, and this is something that not just me, but many others have noticed, is that he really didn't specify this data that is still going to be collected by the NSA. He really didn't get into where it would actually be stored, which is something that's been a big topic as well. What did you take away from that? That seems to be pretty important.
Yeah, I think he mistakes where the real constitutional question is. The constitutional question is on the collection more so than even the storage. Because I think if it's collected unconstitutionally, whether the government stores it or whether a private contractor stores it, really isn't so big a deal. In fact, I myself am probably less likely to want all my data, held in by a private contractor as well. So, I mean, the whole point is I don't want my data collected. It isn't
right.
Who's holding it. I don't think it should be collected unless you've been accused of a crime. And, we have to realize, he pointed out Paul Revere and said, the NSA is just Paul Revere. The problem with the analogy is Paul Revere was riding through the streets warning us that the British were coming. He wasn't riding through the streets saying the Americans are coming. So it's one thing to spy on foreigners. It's one thing to spy on potential terrorists, but it's another thing to spy and collect data from all Americans.
Exactly. And leading up the investigation into this, I don't really have a lot of faith in the person he appointed to this task, John Podesta. What is your reaction to that particular individual being named to head up this investigation? There's a lot of controversy surrounding this man.
It's not so much the individual, but that I don't think the administration can be trusted to investigate themselves. I don't think oversight, really, whether it's a Republican president or a Democrat president, I don't think they can oversee themselves. And this president really, I think, fundamentally misunderstands due process and the law. He thinks, well, we'll just have a few more government lawyers look at this to make sure that we protect privacy. Well, privacy means obeying the Constitution, and the only way we can debate and decide what the Constitution says about this subject and whether the Fourth Amendment applies is in an open court. He's been doing this in a secret court called the FISA court. And I think these decisions, particularly when we're discussing constitutionality, ought to be decided in an open court, and that really means the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where it's heading. Yet a federal judge in D.C. said that who ruled that it absolutely did violate the Fourth Amendment. But then another one in New York who said it didn't. So it's going to be coming up to the Supreme Court on this. If you could gaze into your crystal ball, I know that there's a few issues before the Supreme Court, rather. If you had to gaze into your crystal ball, Senator Paul, how do you think that this is going to play out in terms of civil liberties, the NSA, all of that?
Well, we have 350,000 people who have signed up to be part of a class action lawsuit, and so we're going to be filing that sometime this month, hopefully. And I think that by looking at some of the statements that the Supreme Court justices have been making, at least 5 of them have made comments saying that a ruling from the 70s, it was called Smith versus Maryland, that in that ruling they are concerned that it's being overly interpreted to mean something it doesn't mean. That was a court case that said you could tap the phone of one individual for 13 days, and the government's interpreting that to mean that you can tap or collect the data on every American phone for 5 years. So it's a much bigger and different situation, and I think the Supreme Court, almost inevitably, we're going to win at the Supreme Court level in the sense that I think the Supreme Court will rule that the Fourth Amendment does protect some privacy, and there is a little more expectation of privacy than the government's letting on.
Right. And just to clarify, too, there has been no demonstrable success stories from this NSA surveillance, correct?
I don't believe anyone's been stopped. I don't think one terrorist attack has been stopped. They're now pointing back to 9/11. But if you'll recall, in 9/11, there was some good police work being done that people ignored. There was an FBI agent in Minnesota who captured Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker. He wrote 70 letters to his superiors at FBI headquarters, and they were all ignored, asking to get a warrant. Had they given him permission to at least ask for getting a warrant, the threshold for getting a warrant is fairly low. I'm pretty sure he would have gotten a warrant. There's a good chance we could have stopped 9/11, but it doesn't mean through a dragnet of all American records. It means just good police work where you ask a judge. If someone's accused tonight of murder or rape or any horrible crime, the police have to call a judge. And judges are pretty good about giving warrants. It's a rare occasion when you don't get them, but it's important that we separate the judges from the police, that it's this one step, it's this check and balance that police don't write warrants, judges do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Senator Rand Paul, we definitely appreciate your actions on this issue on behalf of the American people. And we're going to be watching to see how this case, it's going to be before the Supreme Court. That seems to be certain. But we do appreciate your work on behalf of our civil liberties. And thanks so much for talking to us about this today.
Thanks for having me, Dana.
All right. Take care.